Hello, I'm here with Jim Poyser today to talk about Climate Follies, which will be in the gallery at South Shards on Thursday, August 11 at 7 p.m. Climate Follies, written by Jim Poyser, is a comedy series about the unfunniest thing ever, climate change. Today I am here to talk to Jim about the project. He will be at the event on Thursday as well. Jim, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Thanks, Bridget. I was born in South Bend and lived there until I went to college in Bloomington at IU. And then 30 some years ago, I moved to Indianapolis. So I have lived in Indiana my whole life and have enjoyed that, as challenging a place as it can be. I have been a newspaper editor in the past and am currently the director of advancement for Earth Charter Indiana, which is a statewide nonprofit working at the intersection of climate science and civics, focused on empowering young people.
Great, thanks, Jim. So let's jump into Climate Follies. Let's talk about what this play is about, how it is performed, and how you came to write and direct this performance.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm lucky that I'm to say that I'm not the director. I am the playwright of the project.
Yes, sorry.
It's okay. It's just a good opportunity for me to call out my partners in this project. David Hoppy, a longtime friend, is producing this project, and we have as a director John Green, who I knew well back 20 years ago when he was the head of the theater department at Butler University here in Indianapolis. Some of the most extraordinary theater I have ever seen was directed by John Green in those days. He left Butler to go run the theater department at Columbia College in Chicago, and now he has transitioned into doing projects on his own. And I'm glad that one of the projects he's picked is Climate Follies. So David and John will both be on hand at the event, and John's just an amazing director, and I'm sure we'll have some great acting tips, because how we're doing this particular version of Climate Follies is we want the participants to volunteer to read the scripts, those who feel comfortable doing so. The kind of the metaphor for that for me is that climate crisis is going to impact everyone, and so we need to find ways for all of us to participate in resilience, in finding solutions, and helping each other cope with this extraordinarily anxiety producing subject of the climate crisis.
Yes, we're looking forward to kind of seeing that, and it is, climate change is no joke, and but your play takes it says it's a comedy, so it takes some fun spins, or how do we get the comedic part of this?
Yeah, so back in 1979, there was a notice in the newspaper in Bloomington, and I was in college at IU, as I mentioned, and a brand new theater named the Bloomington Playwrights Project was looking for scripts. And I'd never written a play before, but I had certainly been writing my whole life, essentially. I started writing short stories when I was 8 or 9 years old, and there was always a comedic twist on all of them. And so I said, what the heck, I'll write a play. Well, they picked it, and it was the first staged production for the Bloomington Playwrights Project. At that point, I was finishing up my degree in telecommunications and English, and I decided to stick around Bloomington for the next half decade or more to continue to write plays, because it was so much fun to be able to write a script and see it performed in front of people and get that immediate feedback. The ethic of the Playwrights Project, which still exists to this day in a slightly different form, but the ethic was always to produce new plays and have the plays be considered in draft form so that audiences could inform the revision process. So it was an extraordinary opportunity for a fledgling playwright such as myself. I ended up writing 20 or 30 plays during that period of time, and saw most of them produced. Um, and have done some theater since then, but I did abandon for the most part that career. So I use the word career loosely. It was a mission, it was a purpose, it was a labor of love. But in probably 2019, so pre-pandemic, I said to myself, Jim, you are in your 60s now, and it's time to figure out what you want to do. Now, my day job is about being honest and truthful, but also positive about the climate catastrophe. In my heart, I am feeling a lot of frustration and some darkness and a lot of anxiety and anger and guilt and shame. And I thought maybe I should return to playwriting so I could get at some of those emotions. And since I've always written in the short play absurdist format, I thought that that would be a particularly good way to process what is the most unprocessable subject for humans. We are not equipped to deal with the extraordinary, interconnected, far-reaching subject regarding our changing climate. So I began to produce these, and they just poured out of me. I wrote, 10 or 15 of them within just a couple of months, and eventually put together a package of about 20, which were performed in Indianapolis at the Indie Fringe Festival. That's where I got this t-shirt.
It's a great t-shirt.
Yes, it's all about getting a t-shirt with your name on it. My experience. And that was a lot of fun. I mean, we had our actors were masked the whole time. So there was some aspects of it that were a little unsatisfying to me as a playwright who wants to see people's faces. That was followed up by a reading at Butler University by students. They chose this play because, as we know, younger people have a particularly strong investment in trying to figure out how we can create a livable planet for them in the future. So I've had some nice sort of traditional ways of doing this theater piece. I've continued to write new pieces, throw out some of the pieces that I didn't think worked so well. And now with John Green and David Hoppy, we're creating more of a community participatory event. So we did this in Michigan City a couple months ago. It was a lot of fun. About 75 people showed up to Lebesnick Art Center, and probably 15 or 20 actually ended up reading the script. So mea culpa, I do print the scripts, I bring copies, and for anybody who volunteers to read, they would be assigned a part, and then we would hear the play read aloud. It's a cold reading, so we're not expecting, Tony Awards. It's a cold reading, and hopefully we're laughing, because hopefully they're funny enough. And then, excuse me, each place will focus on a different aspect of the psychology or the science around climate change. And so then we can have a discussion about it. Now, what was really cool in Michigan City is a bunch of local climate activists attended.
Oh, cool.
And they were able to talk about what they were doing. So if there's a mission to Climate Follies on a general sense, it is to perhaps bring more people into the conversation about climate who maybe feel they're overwhelmed by the politics of it, they're overwhelmed by the science of it, or whatever. It's sort of like, come on, let's have fun with something that's not fun. Let's see what can happen. And while you're there, you're going to meet some really amazing people from Munster and the surrounding area who have some really exciting projects on a sort of a local and regional level about how we're going to address this huge problem, what we're going to do to create a more resilient and safer world for our children and grandchildren.
And what a great way to talk about something so difficult than to kind of, it's almost like a teaching process, but you can have fun with it at the same time, but you're getting educated about such a serious matter. And you said that there's around 20 short plays within this, larger grouping of them. And how long does each like short play go?
Yeah, so I'll bring probably 5 scripts with me, and they're 2 to 4 minutes long.
Oh, fun. So, and then, just out of curiosity, if you had to like pick one to talk about, well, like maybe a little, brief summary of what one
Sure,
play
yeah,
would be about.
that's a great question. So I mentioned earlier this litany of emotions that I feel associated with climate. And one of these is called Pearly Recycled Gates. And it's about a man who's lived an exemplary life by any standard, cultural, religious, or whatever, who actually meets St. Peter and can't get into heaven because he's emitted too many carbons.
Mm-hmm.
He used his leaf blower too much. He ate too many steaks, And I think it's hilarious. I mean, it certainly has a sort of a Christian portal to it, as opposed to maybe other denominations. But anyway, it really is also a way for me to poke fun at myself, because when you get into the business of climate, you really, at least I'm just going to speak for myself, that judgment machine about what other people are doing that isn't good for the climate, that is a constant noise in my mind. And so I don't know how to stop that machine. I don't know how to stop being angry at people for idling their cars, or for not knowing who their state representative is, or whatever. So there's one way I can address it personally, which is to expose what I believe to be my own flaws.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a bunch of these plays are really not about blaming other people so much as looking at my own psychological and emotional response to this, as I keep saying, unfathomable subject of climate.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really funny play. It was one of the plays that the original director who made this shirt, Raphael Schwartzman, whom I love, he was like, I don't think this play's going to work. But thankfully, he kept it in the original package, and it was one of the ones that was most appreciated by the audience, because I think we're all going through that process of, I ate meat today. Yeah. I drove my car when I could have taken the bus. Like, all this stuff, and we know we all need to be better across all those sectors. But ultimately, some of the plays we probably won't get to because they're a little bit more complex for a cold reading. We have to understand that the majority of carbon emissions and the majority of the egregious greenhouse gas pollution is coming from mega industry.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're going to sit around and blame each other for what we had for lunch today, we're not really addressing these larger systemic issues. Yeah. I won't say that Climate Follies is very successful at that, because that's going to take continued development of this project for me to be able to get at some of those even more complex factors. This focus is really more on the personal and kind of more on the autobiographical experience for myself of being someone who goes into schools, talks to kids. I'm the one who's bringing in the bad news of what plastic can do, plastic pollution can do, or what carbon emissions are doing to the atmosphere to warm the planet. So it is first and foremost a personal processing project. I feel a little selfish about it, but I don't know what to do with all these emotions. And then along with that, I hope that it is an experience for a community member to process some of their own complex emotions, and then find out what's going on in their own town that they could then join in on making changes in their communities to build a stronger community in the face of climate.
Thank you so much, Jim, for chatting about this today. Again, Climate Follies is taking place this Thursday, August 11 at 7 p.m. in the gallery at the Center for Visual and Performing Arts. That's at 1040 Ridge Road in Munster, Indiana. In the gallery, we have a beautiful exhibit, Nature Lovers, curated by Linda Dorman and Tom Terlemke. The exhibit and the gift shop will be open prior to the event, so come and stop by and see the exhibit. We are super excited to host Climate Follies and looking forward to Thursday.